Is there order in the dance of the planets? Or is the sky just chaos? In the 17th century, a man in Europe asked these questions. He examined the sky with a telescope, calculated the paths of planets with numbers, and shattered millennia-old misconceptions. In his time, some thought him mad, but he passed into history as the founder of modern astronomy. Tonight we will discover the story of Johannes Kepler, who tried to solve the secret of the universe. Before we get to the video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Share in the comments which city you're following us from. Now let's begin the journey of the scientist who searched for the secrets of the universe in mathematics. Johannes Kepler came into the world on a cold December day in 1571 in Weil der Stadt, a small town in Germany. His family had once been wealthy, but now struggled with poverty. His father, Heinrich Kepler, was a mercenary soldier. He rushed from war to war and rarely came home. His mother, Katharina, was a herbalist. She gathered plants for healing and was seen as somewhat strange among the people. Little Johannes was a weak and sickly child. When he was just 4 years old, he caught smallpox and nearly died. The disease left him weak. It seriously damaged his eyes. His hands began to tremble. But the disease could not touch his mind. His intellect was still sharp and bright. His childhood was difficult and full of pain. His father abandoned the family in 1580 and never returned. He probably died in a war in the Netherlands, but no one knew for certain. Little Johannes had to grow up without a father, living a harsh life in poverty. But his mind was brilliant, and his curiosity was limitless. At night, he looked at the sky and constantly asked questions. What are the stars? Why does the moon change? Why do the planets move? These questions kept him awake, made him restless. The family's financial situation was bad, but they still made efforts for Johannes's education. He was sent to a Protestant school, and it was there that his extraordinary talent was discovered. His teachers noticed that this weak, sick child had an incredible mind in his head. He solved mathematical problems in a flash, learned Latin quickly, solved logic problems with pleasure. He was a poor child, but his head was like that of a rich man. Thanks to his talents, he won a scholarship and managed to enter the University of Tübingen in 1589. He was 18 years old, and his life was about to change. Tübingen was one of Europe's most important intellectual centers at the time, and was a stronghold of Protestant thought. He would study theology there because he planned to become a priest. But at school he met astronomy professor Michael Maestlin, and this encounter completely changed his fate. Maestlin was not just an ordinary teacher, but also a bold visionary. Officially, he taught Ptolemy's old system. Earth was the center of the universe, and everything revolved around it. Everyone had believed this for more than 1,000 years, and the church supported it too. But Maestlin, privately, when doors were closed and alone with trusted students, told something different: the revolutionary idea of Nicolaus Copernicus. Copernicus had died 50 years earlier, but his ideas were still being debated, still considered dangerous, and still created fear. Copernicus had boldly said, "Earth is not the center of the universe. The sun is the center, and Earth revolves around it." This idea was like a bomb for that time. According to the church, it was heresy. According to the Bible, it was wrong. It wounded human pride. But Maestlin looked at the mathematics and saw that Copernicus's system was simpler, more elegant, more beautiful. Young Kepler fell passionately in love with this idea. Copernicus's system was not only mathematically more elegant, it was also aesthetically more beautiful. And Kepler believed in beauty. Beauty was God's sign. He deeply believed that God created the universe beautifully. God was a mathematician, and the universe was a magnificent mathematical poem. Kepler's lifelong great quest had begun in those days, to find the mathematical order of the universe, God's geometric plan. When he finished university, he planned to become a priest. He had studied theology, learned to preach, was ready to serve the church. But in 1594, an unexpected offer came and upset his plans. A Protestant school in the city of Graz in Austria was looking for a teacher of mathematics and astronomy. Kepler hesitated at first because he saw himself as a theologian, but then he accepted and perhaps thought God was showing him a different path, a different service. When he arrived in Graz, he was 23 years old. He was a young, idealistic teacher, full of scientific passion. But it also quickly became apparent that he was a bad teacher. His lessons were too complex for students because he thought too deeply, went too far. The first year he had only a few students. The second year he had no students at all. The school administration began seriously considering firing him. But then something unexpected happened, and everything changed. Kepler's astronomical and astrological predictions began to come true incredibly. At that time, astronomers not only studied the sky, they also practiced astrology, made predictions about the future. They made weather forecasts, predicted political events, warned about diseases. Kepler didn't really believe in this inwardly, but had to do it to earn money and keep his job. In 1595, he made several important predictions. He foresaw the Turkish attack, predicted severe cold, and wrote that a peasant uprising would come. And surprisingly, they all came true. People were amazed and began to respect Kepler. The school administration decided to keep him. However, Kepler's mind and heart were elsewhere entirely. He was not interested in daily predictions. He was searching for the deep secret of the universe. In July of 1595, while teaching, an idea suddenly came, as if a light descended from the sky. He saw a vision, an understanding flashed. There had to be a mathematical relationship between the orbits of the planets. There had to be an order. And this relationship could be explained with geometric shapes, with God's language. With excitement and without distinguishing day from night, he began to work. There were 5 known planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. With Earth, there were 6 orbits. Kepler constantly asked, why exactly 6? Why not 5? Why not 7? This number could not be random. God would not create anything randomly. And finally, he thought he found the answer. There were exactly 5 Platonic solids. These were perfect geometric shapes known since ancient Greece: cube, tetrahedron, octahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron. If you placed these 5 perfect solids appropriately between the planetary orbits, the planetary distances were mathematically explained. Kepler was crazily happy and believed he had found God's cosmic plan. The universe was a geometric magnificence, a mathematical symphony. In 1596, he excitedly wrote and published his first book, Mysterium Cosmographicum, The Mystery of the Cosmos. This book was an idea both brilliant and ultimately wrong. The geometric model would not match observations in later years, but the approach was definitely correct. Understanding the universe with mathematics, with geometry, with numbers. This book made him famous throughout Europe. Great astronomers from all corners of the continent noticed this young and bold German. The famous Galileo Galilei sent a warm thank you letter from Italy and wrote that he appreciated his ideas. And most importantly, Tycho Brahe, Denmark's legendary observer, read with interest and began to pay attention to this young man. However, life in Graz began to become increasingly difficult. The Counter-Reformation wave had begun in Austria. The Catholic Church wanted to regain its lost power and was systematically oppressing Protestants. In 1598, the Protestant school in Graz was forcibly closed. Kepler suddenly became unemployed, and his future became uncertain. In 1599, he married Barbara Müller, but this marriage was unhappy from the start. Barbara did not understand Kepler's dreams, his scientific passion at all. For her, Kepler was just a poor and strange teacher. In 1600, the situation worsened considerably and became hopeless. Archduke Ferdinand forced all Protestants to leave Graz. Kepler also had to leave. He had no other choice. But where would he go? Who would want him? Just at this dark and hopeless moment, a saving invitation came from Tycho Brahe. Tycho was no longer in Denmark. He had moved to Prague. He was working as imperial mathematician in the court of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II. And he wanted Kepler as his assistant. Kepler went to Prague, hesitantly but desperately at the beginning of 1601. Tycho Brahe was famous, wealthy, and quite an egotistical man. He had an artificial nose made of silver and copper alloy on his face, because he had lost his real nose in a duel in his youth. He had been meticulously observing the sky for more than 40 years, and had the most accurate, most comprehensive astronomical data of the pre-telescope era. But he didn't understand mathematics much, was weak in theoretical thinking. Kepler was exactly the opposite. He was a brilliant mathematician, but had no observational data. Without tangible data, his theories remained in the air. The two complemented each other perfectly, but at the same time their characters clashed. Tycho tried to protect his data and did not want to share it easily, because this was the product of his 40 years of labor, his treasure. Kepler desperately needed this data, because he had to test his theories, verify his models. There was constant tension between the two men. Arguments broke out. But then, in October of 1601, everything suddenly changed. Tycho died unexpectedly. He drank excessively at a banquet, could not go to the bathroom, and his bladder burst. After lying in pain for 11 days, he died. His last words were meaningful. "Do not let my life have been in vain." Kepler wasted no time and applied to the emperor and demanded to take Tycho's place. The emperor accepted. Kepler was now the imperial mathematician, and most importantly, he had full access to all of Tycho's observation notebooks, all his data. He was 30 years old and was about to begin the greatest work of his life. He chose Mars. Mars seemed like the most difficult and most rebellious planet because its motion appeared most irregular. If he could solve the secret of Mars, he could solve all the planets. He worked on Mars for 8 years. 8 long years he made countless calculations, struggled with thousands of numbers. First, he started with the classical assumption, the circle. Since ancient Greece, everyone had firmly believed that planets drew circles. The circle was the perfect shape, the divine shape, the shape of the heavens. Kepler made hundreds, thousands of calculations, but the results somehow did not match Tycho's observations. There was a difference of 8 arc minutes, 8/60ths of a degree, That is approximately 0.13 degrees. An incredibly small difference. Any other astronomer would not care and would ignore it. But Kepler cared, because he knew that Tycho's observations were that precise, that accurate. The 8-minute difference had to be real. It could not be an error. Then he made a desperate and revolutionary decision. He gave up the millennia-old dogma, broke away from the circle. Maybe orbits were not circles. Maybe the sky was not as perfect as we thought. He began to try other shapes. Finally, he tried the ellipse. The ellipse was round but slightly flattened. It had 2 focal points. And a miracle happened. The numbers matched perfectly. Mars's orbit was a perfect ellipse. And more importantly, the sun was at one of the focal points of the ellipse, not at the exact center. This discovery was incredibly groundbreaking, completely revolutionary. For more than 2,000 years, people had blindly believed that orbits were perfect circles. But Kepler boldly, with scientific honesty, destroyed this old dogma. The sky was not perfect, it was mathematically different, and this was not a problem. This was his first law. Planets revolve around the sun in elliptical orbits, and the sun is at one of the focal points. Then he discovered a second order. The speed of planets was not constant, it varied. When close to the sun they moved faster. When far away they moved slower. This made sense, but there was also a mathematical order in this. The line between the planet and the sun swept equal areas in equal times. This was his second law, and was an early expression of conservation of angular momentum. In 1609 he published these revolutionary findings in the book Astronomia Nova, New Astronomy. This book was one of the turning points in the history of science, one of the milestones. Kepler was boldly laying the foundations of modern science, rigorous observation, mathematical hypothesis, testing, revision. If observational data destroys theory, you must change the theory. You must never distort the data. However, his personal life was not easy. It was full of pain. His wife Barbara became ill and died in 1611. He had 3 small children and was now alone. Catholic-Protestant tension in Prague was increasing. The city was plunged into a pre-storm silence. Emperor Rudolf was removed from office and replaced by his more authoritarian brother Matthias. Kepler's salary was not paid regularly, and he suffered serious financial difficulties. During this difficult period, Kepler not only took refuge in his scientific work, but also tried to rebuild his life. But he knew he could not stay in Prague long. Political and religious pressures were increasing. The city was becoming unsafe. In 1612 he moved to Linz, and there became the provincial mathematician of Upper Austria. A year later, in 1613, he married Susanna Reutinger. Susanna was a young, healthy, and understanding woman. This marriage was much happier than the previous one, because Susanna respected Kepler's work. Kepler stayed in Linz for 14 years, and these were the most productive, most fruitful years of his life. He wrote a mathematics book for his children, but this was not an ordinary textbook. There he explained logarithms, taught geometry, showed methods for calculating the volume of wine barrels. This book helped lay the foundations of calculus in later years. But his most important work was still continuing. He was searching for the third law, searching for the universal relationship. The first 2 laws had come from Mars, but there had to be a universal law covering all planets. There had to be a deep mathematical relationship between planets. For 10 years he searched for this hidden relationship. He made countless calculations, tried thousands of combinations, was wrong hundreds of times, and finally in May of 1619, after 10 years of exhausting research, he found it. He discovered the miracle. The square of a planet's orbital period was proportional to the cube of its average distance from the sun. It was that simple, but that deep, that powerful. He published this third law with enthusiasm in the book Harmonices Mundi, the harmony of the world. Kepler was incredibly happy and in divine ecstasy. He wrote in his book, 18 months ago I saw the first light. 3 months ago I saw the dawn. And a few days ago I saw the sun with the wonderful view in all its glory. Nothing can stop me. I am seized by divine madness. Let people mock freely. He heard the secret music of the universe, saw the cosmic harmony of the planets. He had finally solved God's mathematical, geometric plan. However, the world around him was sliding into chaos and drowning in a pool of blood. The 30 Years' War had begun in 1618, and Europe was rolling into a horrific conflict. Catholics were ruthlessly attacking Protestants. Protestants were attacking Catholics. Cities were being burned. Kepler was stuck in the middle and did not fully belong to either side. He was neither fully Catholic nor among strict Protestants. He had his own theology, his own original understanding of God, and therefore was viewed with suspicion by both sides. And in 1615, something terrible, traumatic happened. His elderly mother, Katharina, was accused of witchcraft. Her neighbors brought her to court as a witch and wanted to burn her. Kepler went crazy and mad. He rushed from Linz to Württemberg, bravely defended his mother, hired expensive lawyers, wrote letters. He fought an exhausting and soul-draining legal battle that lasted 6 years. Finally, in 1621, his mother was released. But 6 months later, she died in an exhausted state. This terrible incident deeply shook and disillusioned Kepler. He was finding the laws of the universe, explaining the motion of planets. But the world was still drowning in ignorance. People were still burning witches. He realized he could no longer stay in Linz. In 1626, he moved to Ulm, and there focused on completing the last great project of his life, the Rudolphine tables. These astronomical tables precisely calculated the future positions of all known planets. They were based on Tycho's meticulous observations and Kepler's revolutionary laws. It had taken years and years. Countless labor had been expended, and finally it was completed in 1627. These tables became astronomers' most reliable guide for a century, and ships crossed oceans with these tables. But Kepler was penniless, completely broke, drowning in debt. The emperor had owed him salary for years, and somehow was not paying. In 1630, he desperately went to Regensburg to try to collect his debt. He was 59 years old, sick, tired, and in an exhausted state. He arrived in Regensburg in November, but a few days later suddenly became ill. He burned with fever and spent his last days in pain. He died on the 15th of November, 1630. The impressive epitaph he wrote himself was carved on his gravestone. I measured the heavens, now I measure the shadows. The mind was in the heavens, the body goes to earth. Kepler's legacy was tremendous and immortal. He discovered 3 great laws, and these laws are the solid foundation of modern astronomy. Isaac Newton would find the law of universal gravitation based on Kepler's laws. Even Albert Einstein had deep respect for Kepler. Kepler was among the true pioneers of modern science, observational, mathematical, verifiable, testable science. He died in poverty. Even his grave was destroyed in the 30 Years' War. But his ideas created wealth, transformed science. He measured the sky and gifted humanity the mathematical map of the universe. If you enjoy discovering such inspiring stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Share in the comments what you think about Kepler. In our next video, we will tell the story of someone else who left a mark on history. See you. Goodbye.